Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Jim Sandman, President Emeritus of Legal Services Corporation, whose remarkable transition from 30 years in big law to leading the nation's largest civil legal aid funder has made him a pioneering voice in harnessing artificial intelligence to expand access to justice. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm truly honored today to have Jim Sandman on. Jim has many achievements to his name. I'll name a few of them. Jim is the President Emeritus of Legal Services Corporation, where he served from 2011 to 2020. It is the largest funder of civil legal aid in the United States. He also practiced as the managing partner of Arnold & Porter for 30 years. And he's chair of the advisory board of the Institute for the Advancement of the Legal System, vice chair of the ABA's Task Force on Law and Artificial Intelligence, fellow at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and a member of the American Law Institute. Not finally, because there's a lot more, but Jim is also a recipient of the American Lawyers Lifetime Achievement Award. Jim, it is such an honor to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I didn't get to all of it, but you've achieved some amazing things throughout your career, and I'm excited to talk with you about what you're working on now. If you can give us a taste of that, what are some things you're working on now?
Well, I currently teach at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. I teach 3 courses. I teach professional responsibility. I teach a course called Artificial Intelligence and Access to Justice. And I teach a seminar called Leadership in Law. I'm also a senior advisor to Frontline Justice, a nonprofit that advocates for reducing restrictions on the unauthorized practice of law to permit well-trained, competent, regulated people who are not lawyers to provide some forms of legal assistance that they currently cannot provide because only lawyers can provide legal assistance. I'm working on a project with the American Law Institute to simplify procedures in high-volume cases where large numbers of people don't have lawyers. And I work in a variety of capacities to promote the wise use of artificial intelligence to improve access to justice. And I have a lot of volunteer activities besides that.
I think one of the volunteer activities is we're both on the ABA Center for Innovation Governing Council.
Yes, correct. I serve with you on that and happy to do it. I'm very interested in innovation in law. I think law lags other professions in innovation. The practice of law today looks not that much different from how it looked when I started out in practice. I think we need to be more forward thinking. I also serve as vice chair of the District of Columbia Access to Justice Commission, and I serve as vice chair of the District of Columbia Public Charter School Board. One of my prior jobs was as general counsel of the District of Columbia Public Schools.
That's a lot. You must be very busy.
I like what I do.
Speaking of that, unlike some CVs that I've seen, especially nowadays, there's a lot of like movements from place to place to place. Yours was remarkable to me in that it fits on one page, 30 years of experience at the law firm. And that is something that's truly unique nowadays. I think that a lot of people move from place to place. It must be immensely gratifying to have that experience consistent through one law firm. Must have learned a lot. And I definitely want to get into some of those lessons. And then your contribution at the Legal Services Corporation as president. There's been a lot of change. And it seems as though you've probably seen the majority of that change from 2011 till now in just the immense uptake of technology in doing what we do. What do you think, just to kind of touch on it, what do you think about using artificial intelligence for increasing access to justice? Because it seems like a moment that we've been waiting for a while. And I'm just wondering if you feel the same way.
I do. I'm an optimist about the use of artificial intelligence to improve access to justice. I think it can be a game changer. I think it has greater potential to make a bigger difference in widely expanding access to justice than any other development I've ever seen. It can happen in two ways. One, its adoption by legal aid organizations, legal services providers, to improve their efficiency and effectiveness to allow them to handle more clients, to relieve them of administrative burdens that are currently consuming lawyer time. But in the long term, and we're not there yet, I think the greatest potential is in putting the law in the hands of the people so that they can be advised in terms they understand, that are clear, comprehensible, and usable, what their legal rights and protections are. The problem of access to justice is in significant part a lack of access to information by people who don't have lawyers. They have no idea what the law is and no idea how to access it in a reliable way. They may use some technology tools to get information. Whether that's accurate information is another thing. But I think that nothing scales access to information like technology. There's nothing comparable. And I think that as the quality of artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence improves, particularly in terms of its application to legal matters, I think the possibilities are endless.
Well, definitely preaching to the choir. But I completely agree with you, and I'm excited about what we can accomplish now. And as my audience probably knows, this is kind of like a teaser for where we're going to go towards the end of the conversation. But right now, I would like to go into your origin story because I think there's a lot to learn for all of us. And in preparing for interviewing you today, I saw that you went to Boston College, and I was wondering, did you grow up in Boston?
No, I grew up in Albany, New York.
What was that like? What was your neighborhood like?
I love my neighborhood. I still keep in touch with my childhood friends. I'm part of a Wordle group that every day communicates. I'm in touch with people that I went to grade school with every morning through Wordle. Albany was an interesting city to grow up in. It's the capital of New York State, so although it's a small city, it was about 108,000 people when I lived there, and even smaller now. There was a lot going on there. Nelson Rockefeller was governor of the state from the time I was in third grade until the time I was in law school. And he brought a lot of attention and innovation to Albany. There are a number of educational institutions there. There are always speakers coming to town. It had more going on than the size of the city by itself would suggest. I went to Catholic schools for 17 years, from kindergarten through Boston College, a Jesuit school. Albany has a large Catholic population, Irish Catholic, German Catholic, Polish Catholic. It has a significant Jewish population. It's ethnically diverse. In my educational environment, I was always with other Catholics, but our neighborhood was quite mixed among Jews, Protestants, and Catholics. I had a happy childhood. I'm one of five children. At the time, five kids was on the small end of a large Catholic family. There were
Yeah, now
we
fairly
lived on
big.
we lived on a short block, and there were two other families that had six kids.
And so was it kind of a bedroom commuter neighborhood, or like that you would?
We lived right in the city. Always lived
Okay.
in the city. Yep.
It sounds pretty idyllic by today's standards, and that you can still keep in touch with everyone. That's remarkable.
Um, that's a life lesson to me. Keep in touch with the people you grew up with. They ground you. They knew you when. Whatever you do in your professional life is kind of irrelevant to your relationship. Your relationship pre-existed your professional life. I love that. We always pick up where we left off.
That's great. I feel the same about some of my university friends that I keep in touch with. So, a family of five. Where did you fall within that? Were you the youngest, the oldest, or in the middle?
Right in the middle, number three.
What kind of work did your parents do?
My dad was a banker. He had an interesting background. My dad went to law school, actually. He went to Albany Law School, and he graduated at the top of his class. But he couldn't get a job as a lawyer for a couple of reasons. First, he completed his first 2 years of law school before World War II, then went off to service in the Pacific, came back and completed his third year after the war. There were a lot of people in his position at that time in 1945, 46, people who were coming back to complete their legal educations. And if you look at the rosters of graduating classes of American law schools around that period, you'll see that a number of them were graduating multiple classes in a single calendar year. What they were doing was to try to push through the people who had been in the service and had had a lapse in their education and were trying to complete their law degree as quickly as possible. But the job market wasn't keeping pace with the production of law students by the law schools that were pushing these people through. So the market was tight. And second, he was Catholic, and this was prior to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it was perfectly legal not to hire people on the basis of their race or their religion. It's probably better known that many law firms didn't hire Jews than it is that many law firms didn't hire Catholics. And when he went looking for a job, he went to some firms that said, we don't hire Catholics. He interviewed with one law firm where he met with a partner who said, I don't have a job for you in my law firm, but I am also president of a bank. And if you'd be interested, I have a job for you in my bank. My dad was recently married. He needed a job, and he took the bank job. And on his first day, with his bachelor's degree and his law degree, he rolled pennies in the basement. He went on to become president of that bank and ultimately was recruited to a senior position in one of the biggest banks in the world. My mom was a special education teacher. She taught hearing impaired kids. She'd gotten a master's degree from Columbia University. But by the time I came along, she was a full-time mom.
Wow, immensely talented, smart parents. It's, like the impression is that you grew up in a family with a very can-do attitude and problem solving and probably a good fun environment as well.
Well, there's something else I should mention. My dad, his own father died when he was 15 months old. His dad was a chemist, and during World War I, he worked here in Washington, D.C. at a chemical munitions plant that the Army maintained. And they were working on things like mustard gas. And his exposure to toxins led to encephalitis, and he died when my dad was 15 months old. So my dad basically grew up without a father, and he had a hard start in life, but he recovered from it. He was incredibly resilient, and he never talked about it, but you could see it in him.
What a wonderful example to have a father like that.
My dad was my best man at my wedding. I asked him to be my best man because he fit the description, best man.
Uh, so I would imagine that's, I mean, he was definitely an early influence. I was thinking, some of us, like when we are starting off our careers and we end up being lawyers, some of us do it because it seems like a practical option. But it sounds like your early influence through your father probably pointed you in that direction.
In a way, my dad always maintained his ties to Albany Law School. Albany Law School was a formative experience for him. I think he felt that it shaped him, both personally and professionally. So I never saw my dad as a lawyer. He was a banker. But I was aware of that connection, and he went on in his later years to be chairman of the board of Albany Law School. It was one of his most important professional and personal connections in life. But that wasn't really why I went to law school. I went to law school to keep options open. I went to law school much more to get a JD than because I'd made a decision to get a lawyer, to be a lawyer. I was a history major in college. There aren't a lot of jobs in history. So when I was graduating, I thought I needed another degree. And when I looked at what people with JDs did, I saw them in a wide variety of positions, not just in law firms and corporate legal departments, to the extent I knew there was such a thing as a corporate legal department. But I saw them in business. I saw them all over the nonprofit world, and not just in law-related nonprofits. They were in public service, and not just in lawyer jobs there. They were in journalism. You just saw people with JDs everywhere. And I thought I could imagine myself being happy in any number of those kinds of professions. It struck me as a versatile degree. So that was what attracted me to law school. And then about midway through my first semester of my first year, I realized that they were training me to be a lawyer. And I hadn't decided I wanted to be a lawyer. Well, duh. Why do you think they call it law school? Why didn't I realize that?
Well, it looks like we have more than a couple of things in common, Jim. I also went to Catholic grade school and high school, and also like I got a degree in philosophy and was trying to think, what do I do with this?
Even fewer jobs in philosophy than in history.
Yeah, well, I guess taking a step back for a second, the degree in history. I mean, you excelled at Boston College, summa cum laude. What area of history like really captured your imagination that you enjoyed?
I had two wildly different concentrations. One was in modern American history, the other was in medieval European history.
All right, well, let me take the road less traveled. What part of medieval history, captured your imagination?
It was the professors who captured my imagination. What I learned was the importance of taking great professors no matter what they're teaching. I took those courses. I was probably fulfilling some kind of requirement for the history major that you couldn't take only one kind of history. I don't remember that for sure. But I got hooked by the professors. It was interesting. I'd known nothing about it. It sparked my curiosity. I knew something about modern American history. I was living it. One of the courses I took was medieval intellectual history. Who signs up for a course like that? I did.
I mean, it sounds great. I mean, the part that I get from that is following your curiosity and the people that spark it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
When you were at University of Pennsylvania Law School, which now you're teaching at, when you were a student there, was there anyone that had that same kind of impact on you, that was a professor that you followed?
I can't, not to quite the same extent, but there are two professors who stand out in my memory. One was Martha Field. I believe she was the only woman on the faculty at the time, certainly the only tenured or tenure track professor. She was a descendant of one of the Supreme Court justices, Field. She taught federal courts. And she did the best job of teaching me to think like a lawyer of any professor I had. She was intellectually very rigorous, but she had a way of organizing her thinking that resonated with me, that I had never experienced before. And the other was Alvin Warren, who taught federal income tax. And I ended up loving federal income tax, which I had not expected. He was very funny, real comedian, and he made the course interesting. I loved that it was a code course, not a common law course. The answers were in the Internal Revenue Code and in the IRS regulations. That wasn't like other law school courses. It was a puzzle that you find the answer in these books. He sparked an interest in something that I didn't think I'd be interested in. I took federal income tax because I thought that every law student should, that it was just, part of the basics of your legal education. But it was among the most memorable courses, and he among the most memorable professors I had. Both of them went on to Harvard. At the time, Penn's faculty were serving as a farm team for Harvard and Yale.
You know, I'm curious about always like the transition from law school to the first job. And you were working your first was working as a law clerk, right?
Yep.
How did that transition happen? How did you learn of that opportunity and why did you take it?
I actually did it because I didn't like my summer 2L experience. It changed my thinking about what I might do next, and I needed some time to sort out what my next move might be. And I thought that judicial clerkship might be a professionally acceptable way to buy myself some time. So I got back to law school after my summer job and saw that there was a note on the bulletin board that Judge Max Rosen of the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit was interested in applicants from Penn for a clerkship. He himself was a graduate of Penn. So I applied, and Judge Rosen is to this day the single most important influence on my career as a lawyer. He was my first and most important mentor and role model. Not my plan, but I remember the day I met that man. His chambers were in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The court is headquartered in Philadelphia, which is where they hear oral arguments, but his chambers were in his hometown of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, which is an old coal mining town in northeastern Pennsylvania. And he took me out to lunch that day. I'd never heard of that, a federal circuit judge taking a law student out to lunch. And as we walked to the restaurant, I noticed two things about this man I just met. The first was that he knew every single person we passed, everyone, not just the white guys in business suits. And the second thing I noticed was how the people we met spoke to him and how he spoke to them. The people we met spoke to Judge Rosen with great respect, almost reverence. It was clear that this man was an icon, adored in his community. And second, he reciprocated their respect for every person we met. He stopped, he gave of his time and attention, he engaged them, he said something kind to them, he made them feel important. By the end of our lunch to that day, I decided if he offers me a job, I can't say yes fast enough. He offered me a job, and I said yes immediately.
It sounds to me like you've had some amazing people that you've had the pleasure to be around and receive mentorship from your father and Judge Rosen.
And my mother.
And your mother. I was thinking, was there an experience that comes to mind with Judge Rosen beyond that, like something that you worked on that caught your interest?
Judge Rosen was a mentor of mine for 30 years, not for 1 year. And I didn't realize that when I was leaving my 1-year clerkship with him. I was sad that it was over. I thought it was over. I didn't realize we were just at the beginning of a 30-year relationship. So the depth of his impact on me is in significant part because of the duration of our relationship. I got to know him and I got to observe him in many different ways. But there's one recurring experience that I had while I was clerking that I done my best to emulate. When a clerk completed a draft of an opinion for the judge, he had a ritual. You had to give him your draft and you had to pull every case, article, treatise, whatever you had cited. This was all in hard copy, and put them on book carts in his library so that he could read every single thing that you had cited. And you lined them up in the order in which you had cited them. And then he would go through your draft page by page, and it might take him several days to go through your draft. And when he was done, he would call you into the library, and you would sit next to him side by side. And he would go over your draft line by line. He would not change a word that you had written without explaining why. Say, I read this case a little bit differently from how you read it, or I think this is a more precise word to fit what we're trying to say here. And this was very time consuming on his part. He didn't have to do that. He could have just completed his edits, given it to his administrative assistant, had it retyped, and be done with it. But he thought this was part of his responsibility as an employer, as a boss, as a judge with a law clerk. This was training. And I remember distinctly sitting there while this was going on, thinking, when the day comes that I'm supervising other people's work, this is what I need to do, that this is how it's done. The learning that comes from that kind of detailed, constructive feedback, particularly when the person giving it is obviously so personally interested and invested in your professional development, is incredible. So I have always tried to do that when I'm working with other people.
It's extraordinary and something that gets lost, especially in the talk about AI and technology nowadays, is just the humanity of learning together and sharing wisdom.
I think it gets lost in virtual work too.
One thing that some people don't talk about sometimes is touching base with your parents. Did you ever have an occasion to talk with your parents? Like, did you ever talk with your mom about these steps that you were taking and seeing
No,
what she thought about them?
I was I was I didn't have any master plan. This was all on the fly. I the circumstances that brought me to Judge Rosen, for example, not liking my summer job, that was just sort of a quick recovery step that I took. My career had no organizing principle. It's all been one step at a time and being open to opportunity, making a change when I've reached a plateau, or for some reason just am no longer satisfied with where I am. Um, Being willing to take risks, do something quite different. Um, Learning that you get do-overs in life, that if you were to make a mistake, if something turned out not to be right, you can do something else.
Well, after that, your next step was to work at Arnold and Porter, and we can't summarize that within this podcast, but if you could share any moments, like obviously the first one would just be starting there and what that experience was like.
It was a little hard for me because I hadn't been a summer associate, and all the other associates joining the firm at the time, almost all of the other associates joining at the time I did had been. So they walked right into an environment where they knew people, they had people looking out for them, and I didn't. I did have two good friends from law school who were there. They'd gone there straight out of law school, hadn't clerked. So I had some people to teach me the ropes. One of the reasons I went to Arnold and Porter was because at the time it was not departmentalized. It was not organized into practice group. They had this idea that it was not only acceptable, but maybe even desirable to be something of a generalist that would make you a better lawyer and client counselor in the long term. And I didn't know what I wanted to specialize in. And I was attracted by the idea of being able to work at a firm that wouldn't pigeonhole me right away too early in my career. So I got a variety of experience as a lawyer there. The firm ultimately did organize into practice groups. That was largely client driven. Clients today want lawyers to be specialized. They want the comfort and the security of knowing that the lawyer they're hiring has done their kind of matter 65 times before. But in my early years, I had a lot of variety in my career. I was also attracted there by the firm's pro bono program, which my friends who were there told me about. The firm had a policy that encouraged lawyers to spend up to 15% of their time on pro bono work. I had never heard of a law firm that had a policy so generous. And the firm's most famous and important client was not a global corporation or some titan of industry. It was a poor drifter by the name of Clarence Gideon of Gideon versus Wainwright, the United States Supreme Court case that established the right to counsel in a criminal case in state courts. And I did pro bono work right away after joining the firm. Although I look very stable for having spent 30 years at Arnold and Porter, I moved around among offices within the firm. And that had a lot to do with my ability to stay there for 30 years. When I was a fourth year associate, I was asked if I'd be willing to move out to Denver, where the firm had opened its first office outside of Washington. The office was overworked and understaffed, and the firm was desperate to get people to move out there. I was single and didn't have kids at the time, but I didn't have any interest in picking up my personal life and moving halfway across the country. So eventually I was offered the option to spend 3 months, a summer, in Denver. Could I just help out for a short period? I don't know if you've ever spent a summer in Washington, D.C., but if you're offered the choice between spending a summer in Colorado and spending a summer in Washington, D.C., that's an intelligence test. The answer is Colorado. So I went out to Denver, and within 3 weeks, I had argued 3 motions in court, which I had never done in the big office in Washington, where I was always, lawyer number 4 on a 4-lawyer team. I had never stood up in a courtroom except when the bailiff said, "All rise." And suddenly, within 3 weeks, I've got 3 motions under my belt. I just loved it. And I ended up staying there for 10 years. So 10 years of my 30 with Arnold and Porter were in Denver, which was a wildly different experience from working in Washington. When I went out there, I was lawyer number 6.
Hmm.
Never passed a person in the hall whose name I didn't know, whose family I didn't know, whose job I didn't know. I met my wife out there. We had our first child out there, and decided to move back to Washington largely for family reasons. All the grandparents were on the East Coast. While our move was pending, the then managing partner of the firm asked if I'd be willing to make a detour back to Washington through Los Angeles, where the firm was going to be opening an office. By that point, I was a partner in the firm, and he asked if I would get the office up and running and manage it in its early days. And I talked to my wife. We said, yeah, we thought that'd be just a cool thing to do. I lived in Los Angeles for a little while. I asked him, how long do you have in mind? And he said, I was thinking about 3 months. It turned out to be 14 months, and our daughter was born there. But I had the experience there of, it felt like a startup, although it was a brand new office of an existing law firm. In many ways, it was a startup experience. Every person who came to work there had left something else behind. Some people moved from other offices of Arnold and Porter, but a number of people came there from other law firms. They all had made the decision that casting their lot with this new venture was going to be better than whatever they had left behind. And I realized what an incredible opportunity that is for you as a leader to harness that energy and optimism and enthusiasm. It's magic. It was one of the best experiences of my career. And then eventually I came back to Washington. And then finally, when I came back to Washington, at that point, the leadership of the firm, the management, and they call it a policy committee, executive committee, were entirely Washington based. By that time, the firm had multiple offices and were feeling that they needed the perspective of someone who had not spent the entirety of his or her professional life in Washington on in-firm management. So I was asked to join the management committee and did, and 3 years later became managing partner of the whole firm, which I did, as you mentioned, at the outset for 10 years. And although I continued to practice, being managing partner of a law firm is a completely different job from just being a practicing lawyer. So I had huge variety, both geographic and substantive, in my 30 years at Arnold and Porter. I don't know that any job in any law firm that was in the same place and the same kind of work could have held my interest and attention for 30 years.
Well, now that you explain it, it makes a lot of sense that you had different challenges and different interesting problems to solve there, and the fact that they look to you as one that could take on an interesting kind of unknown, like starting up the office in Los Angeles and also going into Denver as number 6, to also bring that to life, says a lot about the confidence that they have in you about that. And each one is, like you mentioned before, kind of like a creative puzzle to solve. And it sounds like you really enjoy that.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
You did pro bono work there, and then you came to work for and advocating for access to justice at Legal Services Corporation. And how did that transition happen? Because I think there was a few years between Arnold and Porter and LSC, and what was that transition like? Because it must have been, it's a completely different world.
Well, there came a point where I told you I'm not risk averse and I'm willing to make changes. And I loved my law firm. I loved it. But I reached a point where I became disillusioned with the direction that the big firm segment of the profession has gone in. It came to feel to me as if it were all and only about money. And I'm not talking about the clients, I'm talking about my colleagues. If you're a managing partner of a big law firm, you have to be able to pay your associates the going rate, which today in a big city in the United States in a big firm is a starting salary of $225,000 a year at least, plus bonuses. And you got to be able to pay your partners seven figures. And if you're going to play in that game, you have to be able to pay competitively. I felt frustrated at the inability of a single firm to resist the competitive pressures that compel you to run your business in the way necessary to earn that level of revenue and net profit. And I just began to feel sort of out of sorts. Like, this is not why I went to law school. On my list of reasons to go to law school, making rich people richer was not one. And it took me a while. I reached a conclusion. I need to do something else, but it took me a while to figure out what. And then one day I went to the annual pro bono breakfast of the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and the speaker was the new chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools, who had been brought in by the mayor to turn around what was then widely regarded as the worst performing urban public school system in the United States. And she gave this electrifying speech to this room full of lawyers, at the end of which she said, "What can all of you do to be helpful to me in my efforts to improve our public schools?" She ticked off 3 or 4 things, none of which I remember except the last. She said, "If any of you know where I could find a good general counsel, I really need one." It sounds impetuous, but right there on the spot, I thought, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. And I followed up, and 7 weeks later, I was working at the DC Public Schools. If you're looking to make a change in your career, try moving from big law to DCPS. It was wild. And it was the best career move I ever made because it shoved me out of my comfort zone, a world where I had been very comfortable and very well established for 30 years, into a wildly different environment. So I did that for 3 years. And then when the mayor of DC was defeated in his bid for re-election, and I knew that the chancellor who had hired me was going to be moving on, I heard about the opening at the Legal Services Corporation. And I thought that would be a great opportunity as president of the Legal Services Corporation to combine my management and leadership experience with a mission, improving access to justice, that I could be really passionate about.
And one thing I've been really impressed by, Jim, is in hearing you talk about access to justice, because we talk about it a lot. And at the conferences that come up every year, we talk about almost the same figures of people that are unserved. And the passion, the drive, and also like the stick-to-itiveness that comes across when you talk about it makes one feel that it is possible to make a difference. You've definitely touched and motivated me. I think the work that you've done has been absolutely remarkable.
Well, thank you. It's a team effort. As I said, I did pro bono work throughout my career at Arnold and Porter, but I did not understand until I got to the Legal Services Corporation the magnitude of the access to justice problem in the United States. I hadn't been living under a rock, and the scale of the problem shocked me. In the United States today, for example, both parties have lawyers in only 24% of civil cases in state courts, where more than 95% of civil litigation occurs. In more than 3/4 of the United States today, at least one party, and sometimes both, is struggling to navigate a legal system that is absolutely incomprehensible to them. That is not justice. It is not fair. It is not right. It is not just to compel a person who can't afford a lawyer to play by the rules of a system designed only for those who can. I think the problem is urgent. I don't think that's tolerable. to expect that that's not serving the people. In my view, the civil justice system in the United States is flat out failing the people that it's intended to serve. Works fine for business interests. I spent 30 years representing corporate America, and I saw the system from that side, and it's not perfect, but it worked pretty well. Completely different story for individual people who are the overwhelming majority of users of the court system. So I think that both the scale and the urgency of the problem require us to think big and differently about how we approach it. I agree with you. I think the problem is entirely solvable. I don't think this is undoable by any means, and I say that because other countries do civil justice much better than the United States and prove that it can be done. There's an organization called the World Justice Project that every year ranks the countries of the world on their compliance with various indicators of the rule of law. One of the indicators they look at is the affordability and accessibility of civil justice. In the most recent Rule of Law Index, the United States ranks 107th out of 142 countries on the affordability and accessibility of civil justice, and among the 47 wealthiest countries in the world ranks 47th, dead last. I'm sorry, what do we know that other countries don't? I think it's the other way around. So I think it's a solvable problem. And I'm an optimist about the potential to get it done.
Let me put you on the spot about this. For people listening to this that hear that message, which it is a very heavy but real message about where we stand as a country. What are two things that you think we can do to make a difference?
Can you give me three?
Sure.
First, I think we need to simplify legal process. Particularly in the kinds of cases where so many people are unrepresented and where the stakes are high not because there are billions of dollars at issue, but because you're looking at the loss of housing or the loss of one's children or personal safety, the need for protection order against a protection order against an abuser. There is no reason in those cases why we have to be using the same rules of civil procedure, the same kinds of court forms, the same language, the same rules of evidence that we use in complicated business cases. Those are user hostile processes for people who don't have a lawyer. If you use principles of user-centered design that are well established, that's a discipline to rethink legal process. I think you could design a much more accessible system that would be much more amenable to people who don't have lawyers to navigate on their own. So process simplification is one. Second, we need to relax restrictions on the unauthorized practice of law to permit people who are not lawyers, but who are well-trained, competent, regulated, and ethical to provide some forms of legal assistance to supplement the inadequate resources of lawyers. There will never be enough lawyers in the United States to serve the unmet civil legal needs of low-income people who can't afford to pay anyone. That is not going to happen. I'll tell you that based on 9 years of experience heading the Legal Services Corporation. Other countries do this, and there is an increasing movement across the United States to authorize licensed paraprofessionals, or what are called justice workers, to undertake tasks of advising, form completion, other meaningful forms of assistance to people. And third, we need to deploy technology at a much greater scale than we have to address the access to justice crisis. We talked about that at the beginning, the two ways in which you can do that to increase the efficiency of legal aid providers, but ultimately, when the quality is there, to provide artificial intelligence tools to people directly so that they can deal with their legal problems on their own in an accurate and informed manner. We also need more legal aid lawyers and more pro bono. I don't mean to write off the conventional interventions at all, but we need a multi-pronged approach to all this. If you did all those things, I think we'd be looking at a different world.
Absolutely. And we just have to have the collective will and confidence in each other that we can accomplish it. But I completely agree with you that those those are the ways that we can. So with the time we have left, I do want to ask you a couple of questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is clear from the many different activities that you undertake, that you advocate for, that you've filled your life with over the years. The audience might have the question, like, how did you manage to do all of those things and keep everything balanced? Is there such a thing as a work-life balance? How did you do it?
There is such a thing as work-life balance, and I didn't always have it. I think in assessing work-life balance, you need to take the long view. No one's got good work-life balance every day, at least not in law that I know of. There were times I was young when I became managing partner of my firm. Our kids were 5 and 3, and it took a toll. I worked very, very hard in those years, but I came up with routines and rituals to guarantee that I spent time with my kids. One of them was to take each of our children, my son and my daughter, on a separate father-son, father-daughter trip every year in the United States to a destination in the 48 contiguous states of their choosing. And we started off, doing it for a weekend. It turned into 5 days every year. And our kids, the most precious gifts I've ever received, they've made picture books of all our trips together. And I did other things as well. I don't want to suggest that doing something like that is a substitute for being home for dinner at night. But ultimately, what I decided, I think it's important, if you're happy in your work-life balance is much easier to achieve because the work side is less of a drain on you. Your work side can be a positive. It can make you better in the other half of your time or whatever fraction of your time it is. And finally, I think it's important to have family that share your values and that are supportive of what you do and that check you periodically. So my wife, in a very gentle way, encouraged me into public service, never making me feel guilty about it, just saying, I think you would enjoy that. I think you would be happy there. And finally, for me, doing mission-driven work, doing something that I'm passionate about, that I think matters, I just have more peace of mind. Work-life balance isn't just about how many hours you spend on work and how many hours you spend on other activities. It's about how you feel and whether I'd call it happiness more than work-life balance. I'm happy. I'm a happy lawyer.
And happiness is very important. I think we kind of lose sight of that with the work and the drudgery day in, day out.
Yeah.
The last question I have for you has to do with something that's very related to all of this, which is at the end of the day, you've had an amazing career in everything that you're working on now. The beautiful influence of your mother and father and all of the people and mentors that you've had. What makes it worthwhile for you? It sounds like those trips with your children were just absolutely amazing. But I guess, I'm sorry, you got to me with that one. But let me ask you.
I guess, at this point in my life, I'd say two things. I feel like I found my calling, my real calling, later in my career. And that's okay. Better late than never. But I came into the world of access to justice relatively late in my career. And then suddenly, it was almost like that moment when with the DC schools chancellor, when I thought, that's it. I said, that's it. This is perfect. So I feel fulfilled in what I do. And I have an incredible family, and all of whom are in law. My wife is a lawyer. She's an environmental lawyer. Our son is a lawyer, and he works in a big law firm and has been there for 10 years. And I may be just trying to assuage my guilt at how hard I worked when he was young. But I hope that maybe the fact that he decided to go into big law is some validation of the fact that he didn't see it as a career that destroys people and their families. And our daughter is not a lawyer, but she works in the Federal Public Defender's Office in Maryland. She's a social worker. She's an investigator, and she works with indigent criminal defendants, usually people who have serious mental health issues. And she works to put together the case in mitigation of sentencing, alternatives to incarceration, reduce sentences, reduce charges, or to find treatment programs for them in the penal system if that's where they end up going. I'm very lucky.
Well, it's definitely been a pleasure to speak with you today, Jim, and to learn more about you and your life. It's been a wonderful life.
Well put. They should maybe I should make a movie.
I hear it's pretty good. Well, with that, with everyone listening in and hearing you talk about access to justice, for example, how could they keep in touch with you and learn more about that?
Give you my personal contact information. My email address is james.j.sandman@gmail. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but not terribly active there.
Well, thank you again, Jim, for being on. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise, Tom. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for all of you tuning in today. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.